This is the Politics of Everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. We're examining the politics of anxiety, a topic many of us can relate to. I'm with Dr Jodie Lowinger, a doctor of clinical psychology and university medallist who has decades of experience in management consulting, executive coaching and business. She helps others optimize performance, resilience, mental health, and a winning mindset. As the CEO and founder of Mind Strength, Jodie empowers leaders and teams with her expert strategies and also helps combat performance blocking behaviours. Jodie's worked with top end of town, including Macquarie Bank, PwC and Harvard University, and has consulted to organisations including Lendlease and American Express. Jodie's also the founder of the Sydney Anxiety Clinic, a leading anxiety treatment clinic for adults, children and teens. She also advises on mental health and resilience in schools and frequently presents on cyber safety, managing bullying, reducing anxiety, boosting resilience and building a growth mindset. She's a popular speaker and media commentator and also the ambassador for Streetwork, a national charity to mentor troubled teens and turn their lives around. Welcome to the podcast, Jodie.
It's lovely to be here, Amber.
So what was your childhood dream and did you get there?
My childhood dream was actually to be in advertising. I wanted to be a creative director and I ended up doing some work experience. I think it was George Patterson Advertising at the time. And I loved art. I was in Art Express. My major work was actually a series of emotions in childhood. But my love for art didn't quite translate to being in the advertising world, but it did translate to being in the field of psychology. When I did a Bachelor of Design, and when I was doing that, I actually found that I was helping my colleagues and my lecturers with their anxiety at the time. So it's quite ironic.
So the worlds collided somehow, the creativity obviously, as well as the anxiety and the interest in mental health.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of that sort of deep kind of passionate drive that takes you towards creativity and that analytical mind. There's a lot of similarities in that space. Yeah.
So what was your first job and how did that shape you?
My first job was tutoring the daughter of one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Australian history. And it actually was a really fabulous life experience. I ended up learning a lot from the family. They almost took me in as a sort of a surrogate member of the family and learned a lot about being an entrepreneur and establishing business and establishing my own little business at the time. I was really young at the time. It was a great experience.
So what is anxiety and how do most people get diagnosed with the condition?
So anxiety is one of these fascinating things because it's actually not the enemy. Anxiety is actually a really important friend. It's a physiological reaction to threat. So it's an incredibly important aspect of our physiology as human beings. And it's the fight or flight reaction that gets triggered in the case of threat to help us to fight the situation, to defend ourselves, or to run away if we need to. And so what it really is a rush of adrenaline and cortisol through our bloodstream, setting up our body, tensing up our muscles, doing all sorts of different things to get us primed to be able to look after ourselves. The problem in contemporary society is that this mechanism gets triggered in reaction to our perception of threat, not just in reaction to real threat. And when I talk about perception of threat, what I'm referring to typically is a worry thought. that says, what if something bad happens? Or what if I'm not good enough? Or what if they judge me? Or what if that dog's going to bite me and kill me? So that's sort of offshoots of that perception of threat. It's diagnosed, it becomes a diagnosable problem when it's causing fear and suffering and avoidance in a person's life. So it's getting in the way of their capacity to function as they would otherwise want to do.
So what are the most common ways to treat or manage anxiety, and has that changed over time?
Yeah, it's certainly changed over time. A while back, we had psychoanalytic psychotherapy, which looked at some of our early childhood experiences and the contributors that some of early life beliefs or patterns of behavior might contribute to how we engage as adults or subsequent stages in our life. Then that moved to the cognitive behavioral therapies. Cognitive being looking at our thoughts, and behavioral, of course, looking at our behaviors. There is now a third wave of therapies, which is similar in many respects to the cognitive behavioral therapies, but incorporating mindfulness and values-based strategies. So an example of that is acceptance and commitment therapy. As far as the way that I practice as a therapist, as both a clinical psychologist and a coach, a corporate coach, is I'm a hybrid kind of individual. I like to take the good stuff from all of them, and I like to think that there's no one size fits all. Everybody is different. And so the way I engage with everybody is really based on their own individual needs.
Absolutely. So I know that Beyond Blue states that in any one year, around 1 million Australian adults have depression and over 2 million have anxiety. And obviously they're the numbers that we know, but there might be hidden, numbers within that as well. Do you think Australians are more anxious than in previous generations, or are we just better at recognising it and doing something about it?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a combination of both. We are certainly better at recognizing it. Thank goodness in the society that we live in, there's attempts to raise awareness. That is, I feel like I'm on a personal mission in that space, in my desire to break down stigma and help people recognize the signs, and help people also to recognize that in that space there are many practical and effective strategies to help people to deal with these sorts of problems. But there is still extensive stigma associated with mental health challenges, and so there's more to be done in the space of raising awareness. As far as are Australians just more anxious, we can come back to looking at the society that we live in. Our society of overstimulation, oftentimes or sometimes 24/7 stimulation.
You mean with smartphones and devices and constant messaging, I guess we're always on, really, aren't we?
Spot on. We're always on. So we, as you say, the mobile phone is a classic thing. We've got it by our bed. We're checking our messages in the middle of the night. I heard a fabulous speaker the other day who said, it was Maggie Dent. She's wonderful. She used the analogy of saying we wouldn't go and check our post box in the middle of the night, would we?
So true.
I thought that was brilliant. So thank you, Maggie, for that one. Yes, but it's exactly right. So there's this endemic fear of missing out. We're constantly engaged, and there's also this sense of compare and despair. So through social media, through the internet and the fabulous world of the internet, we have got at hand a massive amount of information and a massive capacity to compare ourselves and find people who are better than us and more, we put our best face forward.
Absolutely. It's a very sanitized version of reality.
It is. It's a very airbrushed version of reality. And now if we look at our biology, we were designed to roam in fields. We were designed to run around in the grass, not just have a green wallpaper on our computer. We weren't designed to look at green on our screen. We were designed to roam around in green. So the fast-paced living, and it actually starts, this overstimulation starts from day one. We give our children iPods, iPads.
I know.
iPhones.
You make yourself feel very guilty here.
And we feel that we're not good enough unless we're doing this, unless they're watching the stuff on the technology. And then it's endemic in teenage years as well.
Absolutely. So corporate life and business stresses are a key factor for many professionals. And I suppose I picture myself in my corporate career, anxiety was just part of everyday life. I sort of accepted it as a bit of a norm. But how can modern workplaces help their staff and their leaders in many ways set the example in what you must admit must be a bit of a taboo area that remains a little bit sort of on the fringes of workplace health and safety? There are organisations which, they might focus on mental health aspects, but are they really walking the walk and talking the talk? I'm curious to know your experience of how workplaces can do this better and make it more acceptable.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. Workplaces are moving beautifully in the right direction. If we look at best practice workplaces, they're embracing well-being and mental health as not a nice to have, but an absolute necessity, an absolute need to have. And it's not warm and fuzzy. Let's put aside any warm and fuzzies to this. This is about a bottom line imperative. So organizations recognize that when we look at mental health, it's to boost productivity and performance. When people are experiencing anxiety, one of the default behaviors is avoidance, procrastination. This fear of not being good enough drives aspects, behaviors that get in the way of getting the job done, of taking risks, of stretching our comfort zone and embracing peak performance. So the work that I do in business is all around strategies to embrace peak performance, resilience, mental health, and empowerment, and getting the job done. So what we do in organizations when I'm working to raise awareness around mental health, sometimes I do presentations that simply talk around strategies to help with mental health. Sometimes I'm looking at preventative measures, which is really important, a whole lot of work around resilience. And the fact is it reduces absenteeism, it reduces turnover, it reduces presenteeism, it increases productivity, and it mitigates an organization's risks. The other element that is really powerful in this space is holding on to high potentials. It's holding on to talent. In a world where there's a lot of movement, and certainly some of the up and coming and current younger generations, they shop around, and the best people will shop around. And so the people side of business and respecting that side of business is an incredibly important differentiator for holding on to high potentials and your best talent. And soon enough, it's not going to be a differentiator. Soon enough, it's going to be the norm, which is a tremendous place to be.
It's a huge leap forward from, say, a decade ago when I was in corporate, and almost you almost feel bad to take a day off, let alone, if you're having mental health issues, actually say to your manager or your boss, I'm struggling, I need help and support. It was that idea that you were weak or that you perhaps couldn't cut it. So yeah. I think it's such a big step to even be talking about it in the corporate space.
It really is. And best practice organizations are truly recognizing that a command and control culture and a culture based on threat or punitive strategies simply doesn't work, because it gets people in this hijacked by their amygdala kind of brain space. It takes them away from creativity and from productivity, which is emanating from their cortical, from their prefrontal cortex in their brain. When we feel threatened, we get hijacked by our emotional brain and we engage in counterproductive processes, behaviors.
Absolutely. So do you think anxiety is as much about your brain's chemical makeup as well as your own reaction to the external stresses such as, I'm not achieving family work balance or money issues or even having enough time to do all the things I need to do like exercise? How much of it is who we are and how much of it is how we respond to what's happening to us?
Yeah, it's really a multifactorial kind of thing, anxiety. I do in my clinical practice at the Sydney Anxiety Clinic, I see a lot of family predisposition to anxiety. So the biological basis to anxiety is quite obvious in a large number of the people who I work with. In the clinical space, there are certain clinical diagnoses, particularly things like OCD and other anxiety disorders that have got a stronger biological basis. But there are other elements that can contribute to anxiety, such as traumatic life experiences, early childhood embarrassing or traumatic experiences can lead into things like social anxiety. So there are many elements. There's certainly in the biological basis, we're looking at neurochemical imbalances, things such as dopamine and serotonin.
Can you do much about that? Is there something that you can do that is your story that you can do to counter that?
There's so much that you can do. So one of my key messages is really I want to help people to recognize that they can feel empowered in this space, to seek out the help that they need, simply because there is a wealth of practical, effective evidence-based strategies that can turn things around within a matter of a couple of months, if not weeks. And given the biological basis to anxiety, we can look at things that stimulate dopamine. So this is why the mind-body connection with anxiety is really helpful. So looking at exercise as a stimulant of dopamine, looking at making sure people get good sleep factors in place. They do things that give them a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, so values-driven actions. Mindfulness is really powerful to bring yourself back to the present moment. To embrace the present is a really powerful strategy. So it's not just something that we turn to medication. It's really something that, yes, there is absolutely a place for medication in certain situations, but anxiety can be very readily turned around, looking at behavioral strategies, approaching standing up to worry, as well as approaching avoided situations. So we engage in things in a really holistic way that is not dependent necessarily on medication, but keeping in mind that there certainly is a time and place for medication at the more extreme end of anxiety, if necessary.
So what are some of the most effective measures that all of us can take to maybe prevent our own anxiety becoming crippling? Because I think sometimes it hits you, have a life event or something happens and the sense of overwhelm or panic attacks is something a lot of people experience. What are some ways in which we can maybe stop ourselves from getting to that point?
Yeah, a question around prevention is really a fantastic question, because prevention is so powerful. It's engaging in resilience strategies. So a lot of the work that I do, whether it's in the corporate space or in the clinical space, is really around resilience and a sense of empowerment. Oftentimes, the people who I'm working with are brilliant human beings. I talk a lot about this double-edged sword of anxiety. On the one hand, there's typically an analytical mind, a depth of thinking, a depth of feeling. So when I'm doing corporate coaching, it's not just people who experience anxiety, it's people who are propelled to be the best that they can be. So oftentimes it's perfectionistic kind of behaviors. It's the imposter syndrome, which says, I'm a fraud. They're going to discover that I'm not good enough. And
that's even when you're super successful. That could be CEOs and public figures.
Very much. So a lot of the work that I do in the corporate space is coaching with CEOs and C-suite executives, high functioning, high powered, highly successful individuals is the space that I work with in the business world. And so resilience strategies are exceptionally powerful. It is around awareness, around what are called safety behaviors. So they're the unhelpful strategies that we default to when we are feeling threatened. And so it's this fight or flight. We might be aggressive, we might be passive, we might feel like we need to be perfectionistic. We might feel like we need to check and recheck our work a million times. So it's raising awareness around what resilience actually is. Resilience is about standing up to fear, standing up to worry, standing up to aggression, standing up to being passive, anything that's going down that pathway of when we're not engaging in values-driven actions. So it's this two-pronged approach. On the one hand, I look at strategies to not be bossed around by fear, to stretch our comfort zone, to embrace productivity and performance, and assertiveness. I look at emotional control strategies, so how to regulate emotions so we're not being captured by aggressive behaviors that might get in the way. We look at emotional intelligence. That's a key body of work that I do with people, is around how to engage, how to negotiate, how to get collaboration, how to communicate effectively in whatever field we happen to be in professionally. And then on the other side of that, it's how to embrace a values-driven life, how to tap into what gives us a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, whether it's in business, so looking at corporate values, corporate purpose, what drives us professionally in a business space, or in a personal space. So it's this two-pronged approach to stand up to fear, to boss worry back, and embrace our values and our sense of purpose and meaning in life.
That's a fantastic summary. So do you have any special mentors or inspirational people that have guided you in this journey of life? If so, who are they and what have they taught you?
So one of my key inspirational people was a man named Viktor Frankl. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And the philosophy that I was actually just touching on is very much based on a core principle of what he talked about, which was holding on to your identity, holding on to what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in life, recognizing that a situation might not be great. You know, it's not about positive thinking. It's about reality testing. Yes, positive thinking is very helpful, but it's really about recognizing that sometimes life is going to be tough. The situation is not always going to be in our control, but it's creating space to choose how we respond to that situation, to respond based on our heart space, what gives us meaning and purpose, what we want to have encapsulate our sense of identity, whether it's our business identity or our personal identity, and feeling empowered that we can recognize whatever adversity or challenge comes our way, we can have the power to choose what we want to have driving our response in that situation. So this was based on Viktor Frankl's work.
And very influential, obviously, in your practice, perhaps, and how you think about life.
Spot on. Very influential. He was actually in a concentration camp in World War II. He was in Auschwitz, and which is the epitome of a challenging life experience. And he chose in that space to not lose his individuality, to hold on to what gave him a sense of meaning and purpose. to find resilience. Yes, very powerful.
To wrap up, what would be your top 3 tips for anyone overcoming setbacks in the politics of anxiety? 3 little things that they could be doing.
So I would say to not suffer in silence is incredibly important, to recognize that so around this not suffering in silence, to recognize that there is so much that you can do to seek out the help that you need, whether it's in a corporate coaching capacity to embrace peak performance, or whether it's in a clinical context if anxiety is getting in the way of living the life that you want to live. So tip number 1, don't suffer in silence. I also really want to deliver the message to recognize anxiety not as a weakness, but as very much a strength. There's a person, Sarah Wilson, who I've done some work with, and she's just she's got a fabulous book called First We Make the Beast Beautiful. I absolutely love the message that she's delivering with that book, because it's talking about anxiety not as a beast, but recognizing it can be so much of what makes us beautiful. You know, that as I said earlier, that depth of thinking, depth of feeling, that passion and drive to make a difference on this planet is very much what encapsulates a lot of the people who I work with who experience anxiety. And my third message is to recognize the power of prevention, of resilience strategies, of seeking out things such as assertiveness, communication skills, things that can help you feel strong and powerful. Prevention is incredible. Prevention is really powerful in that space.
Well, it's been fantastic to chat to you today, Jodie. If you want to contact Dr. Jodie Lowinger, there will be some details on our show notes. Until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network and your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests. So if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecoms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.